Today, I'm going to answer a question that I've heard from nearly every narcissistic abuse survivor at some point, which is why is it so hard to leave a toxic relationship with a narcissist? And if that question resonates with you at all, this episode is for you because maybe you can clearly see the red flags. Maybe you know the relationship is emotionally abusive. Maybe you've even said to yourself, I know this isn't good for me. And yet, the thought of leaving this relationship sends you into a spiral. Your chest tightens, your body feels heavy, you feel anxious, you feel frozen. You worry you're going to miss them, even though you know they've hurt you. And that's when the self judgment really creeps in. Why can't I just leave? What is wrong with me? Why am I still attached? So, if you've ever questioned your strength, your clarity, your sanity in this process, I want you to know that your difficulty in leaving isn't a reflection of your character flaw or weakness. It's actually a sign of the abuse because there are very real biological and psychological forces at play here, keeping you stuck. So, today we're going to unpack why your nervous system can fight so hard to stay, even when your logical mind knows it's time to go. Welcome back to Restoring Resilience. I'm Chelsey Brooke Cole, and in this episode, we're exploring why leaving a toxic partner or person can feel physically painful, psychologically destabilizing, what is actually happening inside your brain, your attachment system, your nervous system when you try to detach. So if you've ever felt stuck, ashamed, confused, or really pulled back in after trying to leave, stay with me because understanding this dynamic, understanding trauma bonds can be one of the most empowering things you ever do in your healing. And before we go any deeper, I actually want to clear up one really common misconception that trauma bonds don't only happen in romantic relationships. So a lot of times you hear that phrase trauma bond and immediately you're thinking, okay, that's toxic boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, partner, but trauma bonds can form in any relationship between parents and children, between siblings, between bosses and coworkers, with friends, even spiritual leaders and mentors. Any relationship that combines attachment with harm has the potential to create a trauma bond. So if you've ever felt intensely loyal to someone who has repeatedly hurt you, if you've ever felt responsible for protecting someone who mistreated you, or you felt like you couldn't walk away from someone even if you knew the relationship was draining or damaging or harmful, you've likely been exposed to a trauma bond. So let's go ahead and dig a bit deeper about what that actually means because trauma bond, just like the term narcissism, is thrown around a lot these days. I think in its simplest form, a trauma bond forms when you become attached to someone who also hurts you. Much like gaslighting, it doesn't happen immediately. It takes time to form. And a trauma bond happens in your nervous system. It is felt in your nervous system, which is why breaking away from this person or from this relationship feels like breaking an addiction because it is felt and held in your body. And really, especially in the beginning, you don't want to end the relationship. You just want the pain to stop, which means part of you is pulling away from the pain that's happening in this relationship, but another part of you is pushing toward your attachment, which in this case is also the person who's abusing you. So this creates a feeling of, I can't leave, but I can't stay. I just want the pain to stop. And this feels like an impossible task, so you stay frozen and stuck trying to make it work. So the abuse, the betrayal trauma you're experiencing in this relationship makes the relationship feel so much more sticky and addictive, although you're not addicted, and I'll get to that in a second, because you're not forming a healthy attachment where there's mutuality, there's respect, there's empathy. You're forming an attachment to someone who's also hurting you. However, you don't initially register what's happening or what they're doing as abuse or harm. So from your perspective, all you know is that there's good days and bad days. Sometimes this person can be really caring and you can have a great day where you see all the things that you love and appreciate about them. Other days, they're rude, they're critical, they're passive aggressive. But because this alternation of good days and bad days is happening within the same relationship, you don't want to end the relationship because that feels like giving up the good days too. You just want to figure out how to make the bad days stop. So a lot of times we do all the things: justify, rationalize, apologize, appease, ask for less, give more. But doing these things just makes you feel more invested in that relationship and invested in keeping that attachment, which is actually unintentionally strengthening the trauma bond because you're attached to someone who's also hurting you and you're working hard to keep that attachment despite the harm. And this can lead to a lot of Self-blame and self-deprecation, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I make this better? Or maybe I like the pain. Maybe I'm part of the problem and I like the chaos because I'm staying. So how can I blame them? I must be a part of the problem too. Maybe we're just two messed up people trying to make things work. And you see how that idea in particular really adds to this idea that we just have some kind of intense or unexplainable bond. So there's a really big process going on here that's making all of this feel very sticky. And it's something called euphoric recall. Euphoric recall is a cognitive distortion, which just means an error in your thinking. We all have them. When we remember things better than they actually were, or we only remember the good times. So in narcissistic relationships, this is what happens when you romanticize events in your mind and you only remember the good parts of them. And what happens when we engage in euphoric recall? We tend to underestimate the bad, aka the reality of the situation, and we overestimate the good. We think we have more control over the situation than we actually do. We'll think things like, things aren't that bad. I just need to be more patient. I just need to be more loving. We feel motivated to keep chasing the idea of what it was, even though our idea of what it was isn't accurate or is seriously flawed. And I think in the trauma bonded sequence, euphoric recall usually really comes into play the most when we're at an impasse in the relationship. Maybe they've been dropping abandonment threats. This is never going to work. Might as well end this. I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me. Maybe they've been giving you the silent treatment. You can feel them pulling away. Or maybe it even comes when things feel a bit calmer. Like you haven't really resolved anything in the relationship, but you're not in the heat of things currently. So your nervous system is finally starting to cool down, maybe come out of that fight or flight a bit. And so euphoric recall is a really easy way to convince yourself that you should just stay. You should just give it another chance. You might think things like, well, we did have that great vacation a couple years ago, or they did bring me soup that one time I was really sick 6 months ago. We did have a nice day at the concert. They are sometimes good with the kids. So you rationalize in your mind, things can get better. Like it wasn't always this bad. They've done some nice things for me, even though your mind is blocking out the fact that during that supposed great vacation, you were having awful arguments, they were nitpicking everything you did, or they bring up the fact that they got you soup over and over again as if it was the most caring thing anyone has ever done for someone. And then when you think about the amount of tension that lives in these relationships, how exhausting it is for your nervous system to stay in constant fight or flight for so long. So of course, the stress in general just takes a toll. But this is also someone you love, someone you've married, someone you created a life with, someone you spent the holidays with, someone you grew up with. So not only is your nervous system exhausted, which means you're more likely to just do whatever will give you a break in the moment, which usually means stay quiet and not do anything that's going to upset them. But your attachment system is also going to seek comfort during these high stress times. And you're likely to want to seek comfort from the very person who's harming you. It's like our nervous system can only tolerate so much tension before you just internally collapse and you just want everything to be okay. So you see how euphoric recall would be a huge instigator that tightens that trauma bond. And then once euphoric recall happens, it's like you have a burst of motivation to continue in the relationship. Like your nervous system has settled a bit. You're not in the heat of the moment as much. So now you just don't want to bring anything up that might cause more tension. So you just get quiet. You try to, quote unquote, follow the rules of the relationship and you stay. And I also want to give you a wide angle look at the dynamics at play to explain why you feel so stuck in narcissistic relationships. So trauma bonds hijack your attachment needs because feeling connected is a part of being human. It is why things like social isolation and loneliness literally hurts. The same part of the brain lights up if we're in emotional pain as if we're in physical pain. And the problem with narcissists is that in these relationships, you formed an attachment to someone who also hurts you. So you don't want to be hurt, but you do want to keep the attachment. So every time you think about leaving the relationship, pulling back from this relationship, your attachment system kicks in and pushes you toward the attachment, which in this case is also your abuser. So the push and pull in narcissistic relationships means you start to feel that being hurt is just a gateway to being loved because you know that good days tend to follow the bad days. That's just the cycle. So it's like you develop a tolerance for the bad days because you're anticipating that a good day will come, At some point, they'll try to make up for it or the tension will die down. And in fact, that is why the calm parts of the narcissistic relationship start to not feel so calm in your nervous system, because you might notice that over time you feel more anxious when things are, quote unquote, okay, because that's just the calm before the storm, like a build up to the next argument. So you might even experience a sense of relief when the conflict starts, because then at least your anxious energy has somewhere to go. Like if you've been anticipating an argument that's going to happen, you get to release some of that fight energy from the fight or flight system when you're actually having an argument. So then even calm starts to feel more and more unsafe. And this is how you'll notice your nervous system can get out of whack, and you can start to wonder, like, what is wrong with me? Do I like the chaos? Maybe I'm causing it, because you do notice that your nervous system seems to be lost without the chaos. But I want you to know and hear clearly that it's not because you're part of the problem or just because you love chaos. It's because you've been conditioned to anticipate chaos and you're more familiar with chaos than calm. But healing will help you learn how to regulate your nervous system back to a healthy state where calm does feel safe. Another big factor going on here in this trauma-bonded narcissistic cycle is intermittent reinforcement. Narcissistic relationships are inherently hot and cold. In any narcissistic relationship, there will be good days. Good is, relative, but there are days when it's not as bad, which means in a narcissistic relationship, it's not all bad. And this is essential to understand, because this is what makes the relationships feel so sticky. As soon as you're ready to throw in the towel, maybe like it's been a string of bad days, a string of arguments, a string of passive aggressiveness, and you're finally like, you know what? I am ready to leave. And that's when you have another good day. You have a day where they're not quite as bad. They seem to be listening a bit more. Maybe they're a little bit more attentive. They remember to pick up the milk you needed from the store. They aren't quite as critical. Doesn't even necessarily have to be that it's a positive day. Sometimes it's just less of a negative. And then you're back in your head and you're spinning your wheels and thinking, all right, maybe I just need to give it more time. And from a brain perspective, I want you to hear this. You're chemically motivated to do so because of how intermittent reinforcement works, which is intermittent reinforcement. It's just a psychological principle in which a reward is given to a person for a particular behavior, but only sporadically and unpredictability. So basically, it's a reward that's given randomly. And when rewards are given randomly, we are more motivated to keep chasing that reward. So think of things like gambling, video games, social media. That's why they feel so addictive. You don't always know when the next reward or the next like or the next win on the slot machine is going to come. You just know it's going to come sometime. And dopamine is released even in anticipation of a reward. So everything you do that might make the relationship better, your brain rewards you for. Plus, narcissists are great at breadcrumbing. And when you're slowly starving to death, anything, any affection, any attention, any kind word, you learn to live off of those breadcrumbs or just the small amounts of affection and praise they give you. And so you can see how over time, you're even conditioned to expect and live off of less and less. More dopamine, which is that feel-good chemical, is also released for an unexpected reward than an expected one. And the more dopamine that's released, the more motivated you are to ensure that that reward happens again. So if the narcissist gives you more attention, the less you share your feelings, you are chemically motivated to share your needs less often. And that too is how they condition you to basically become more malleable, to be who they want you to be. There's also the narcissistic cycle of abuse that's going on here that's making these relationships so sticky. So that cycle of abuse is idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. Know that cycle can happen literally in the same day, week, or month. So you're constantly off balance. You're just wanting to hold on to the good days, the good moments. Plus, narcissists convince you that the bad days are your fault. And that if you could ever be, good enough, then you could earn the good days that you used to have. And any self-doubt you have, wondering what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, the narcissist really plays into. So they magnify small things you did that had actually nothing to do with their behaviors, but they use that as proof that somehow you're the one causing the problems. And if you do try to stand up to the narcissist, they might hit you with an abandonment threat. I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me. I can't deal with the amount of tension and conflict in this relationship. You just want problems. You like this chaos. This then brings up your attachment system and euphoric recall. So then you double down on your efforts to try to make things work. So these 3 patterns are why it's so hard to leave a narcissistic relationship. So the big takeaways from today is this. If it's been incredibly hard to leave a toxic relationship, that doesn't speak to you at all. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It likely means a trauma bond has formed. Trauma bonds aren't just romantic. They can form in any relationship where attachment and harm get mixed together. And intermittent reinforcement, the narcissistic cycle of abuse and euphoric recall, can create a very sticky feeling bond. But here's the hopeful part. Once you understand these patterns, you can start breaking them, because one of the big reasons that you stay stuck is because you think this is partly your fault. So you keep looking at yourself, trying to be better, thinking that you can find a solution if you could ever be good enough, when in fact, that is the exact lie of the trauma bond. Keeping the focus on you and you thinking that it's your fault is a huge way narcissists keep you stuck. And I actually break this down even more in my free masterclass, The Narcissist Playbook. So if you want to go deeper in understanding how narcissists keep you stuck in guilt, self-doubt, and exhaustion, in that masterclass, I reveal the 3 core lies narcissists use to do that and show you exactly how you can start breaking free from those patterns. You can find the link to that masterclass in the description. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for this episode. If you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review. That's how we reach more survivors who need to hear this so they can break free and feel empowered as well. And until next time, remember that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we'll keep building it together. So I'll see you in the next episode.